Hi everyone, it's Lindsay and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be sharing with you some different ways to use frame stamps. And this stamp that I'm using today is from the brand new release from Clair Stamps. It is called the Crystal Background Stamp. This is a really fun one. It is a 4x6 stamp set, and to pair with it there is also this other stamp set. It's called Gem. Now I paired this stamp set today with the frame for all of my cards, so you're going to see ways to use that as well. To start off with, I want to go ahead and position my frame in my MISTI. I find using my MISTI works best with larger stamps like this. If you don't have a stamp positioner, you can just stamp this directly onto your cardstock. I like to flip mine over on the backing sheet, leave the stamp attached to the backing sheet, and lay my cardstock on top of the stamp. But for all three of my cards today, I'll be using my MISTI to do my stamping. This is the regular size MISTI. I am going to be going corner to corner on my cardstock here. So for this, I'm going to go 3 squares over and 3 squares up and place my cardstock. I'm using watercolor paper here, and I have some removable adhesive on the back of this. So just temporary adhesive that is going to hold this watercolor paper in place as I do some stamping. Once I have that positioned, I'll go ahead and close the lid of my MISTI and pick up that stamp. Then it's time to start stamping. I'm using some VersaFine Clair ink in Nocturne. This is a great ink that is really great for a lot of things. I've done a lot of different black inks that show what coloring mediums they work with. I'll leave that playlist linked down below. But this works really well for watercolor, which is what I'm going to be doing on this background. Now, because I'm using watercolor paper, it does have a little bit of texture, so I'll go ahead and double stamp this. Mine didn't move on me with that removable adhesive on the back, so I'm easily able to double stamp this without repositioning that paper at all. Alright, now I have my background stamped and ready to go. I did heat set that, so now it's time to add some watercolor onto this. I'll be using these color bursts. These are from Ken Oliver and the Crafters Workshop. They teamed up to create some really great colors that go together. So there's 3 in a pack, and I just grabbed a couple packs of these and mixed and matched some colors. So I'll start off with fuchsia. This is a great pink color. Then move on to turquoise and finally orchid, which is a gorgeous purple. Now to put these on, I just like to pat the bottom. If you squeeze the bottle at all, it's going to do a poof of color. I just want little sprinkles, so I like to tap the bottom, not while they're straight up and down, but kind of on their side. Then once I have a good amount of powder on there, you really don't need a lot. These are very, very concentrated. I'm going to start spraying some water on these. Now, as the water hits those pigment, it's going to start to feather out, really become more intense. It's going to start showing up quite a bit. You can go as heavy-handed or as light as you want to with the water and the powder as well. And it's really fun to just play around with these, kind of see what you like and what techniques work best for you. Now, I added quite a bit of water here to really get those activated and moving around. However, some of the colors were just a little bit too dark, so what I decided to do was take a cloth, lay it over the top, and soak up all that extra color. There's enough pigment in these that the majority of it already is absorbed into the paper, but those darker sections where it's just kind of pooling up are all lifted off the card. So I'm left with some really gorgeous colors, some great blending, but also some that are just kind of sparse and out in the middle, and you still have that really fun bursting effect coming from them. I finished this card off really simply. I added a You Rock sentiment right in the center of that frame with some black ink. Added a few jewels from Cat Scrappiness on there as well. Attached the whole thing to a card base, and the card was finished. It's really super simple and easy, but I love the colorful background on that one. Now for my next card, I'm going to be using some plain cardstock. It's cut to the same size as my earlier panel. They are 3.5 inches tall by 4.25 long. So really easy to cut these down. They're a great size for this frame where everything kind of looks nice and centered on this panel. Now I had some removable adhesive on the back of that panel and I placed it right down 3 over, 3 up. So just like I did the first one. I prepped my surface with my embossing bag because I'll be doing some embossing on this, and I'll be using some Versamark ink to ink this up. Now, I did not clean my stamp very well when I had the Nocturne ink on it before. So whenever I stamp this down, I actually got a gray color. That's fine. It's going to look fine with the card I'm doing, but you can see my Versamark ink was not clear. It had that little bit of Nocturne left over, which is totally fine. Now over this, I'll be putting some embossing powder. This is the opaque iridescent embossing powder from Imagine. This is a stunning embossing powder. They have a clear iridescent, so if you want to do it like over a colored pigment ink or something like that and just add some shine, you can do that. But this one has some white mixed in, so it is nice and opaque. It's going to cover up a little bit of that gray, but not completely, so I'm going to get a really monochrome look going on with this card. It's really fun in the end. I wasn't quite sure how it was going to turn out. But at this point, I just kept going with it. I really suggest doing that. Now, once I put down my embossing powder, I did heat set that off camera. Now it's time to cut out the inside of that frame. So you can do this with your craft knife. I've done it with my craft knife before. It does take a little bit of time. But what I decided to do after I started doing this a little bit and my fingers started to hurt, I was in a little bit more of a hurry than I didn't have time for this today. So what I did was I actually took my craft knife and just made a big X right in the center of this panel. That's going to create a nice opening to get my scissors in there. Then I can start to use my scissors to fussy cut inside that frame. So either way works. You're going to get a better result, I think, with your craft knife if you take your time. You're not going to get any raised edges or anything like that. But if you're in a hurry like I am, scissors work well too. So I went ahead and continued to fussy cut that out. I moved my paper, not my scissors as much. That seems to really help with the fussy cutting process. Once I had that inside of the frame all cut out, I did leave a little bit of a border. It's time to stamp on my background. So like I said, I'm going for a monochrome look here. I grabbed some gray cardstock and I'll position that frame right center in that gray cardstock that I cut to be slightly larger than the cardstock panel, the white cardstock panel. I'll go ahead and place that in my MISTI using my magnet to hold everything in place. Then I can center that You're a Real Gem sentiment right in the center of the frame. If you don't have a MISTI, just use a little bit of low tack tape, like painter's tape, to hold that frame in place. Then you can see exactly where you need to stamp your sentiment to get it nice and centered inside that frame. Once I have mine centered, I'll go ahead and pick it up with the lid of my MISTI and stamp it down. Again, monochrome look here. I use some Twilight ink. This is VersaFine Clair. Again, right in the center of that frame. To finish this card off, I popped that frame up with some dimensional adhesive, added the whole thing to a card base. I also added a few of those little bursts, the clusters of bursts that are in the You're a Real Gem stamp set, and I also added some more gems from Cat Scrappiness just around the sentiment to bring the whole thing together. But I am loving the look of that embossing powder on this stamp. Now my third card, I went ahead and decided to do a little bit of a shaker card. I'm going to stamp my image right onto some acetate. Now this is the most tricky stamping. I'm using Stays On Pigment ink in the snowflake color, so a nice bright white color. This ink is not only great on acetate, this white, it is gorgeous on craft cardstock. Just a little FYI for you. I've never had a white ink stamp as well as this one does on craft cardstock. Now I went ahead and inked that up. You want to be a little bit quick with this so it doesn't dry on your stamp. And then I stamped it down onto my acetate. Now I do have removable adhesive on the back of this. Big mistake. Let me just tell you that right now. It doesn't hold it in place. It doesn't have enough stick because this ink wants to stick to everything. Your paper's going to come up. Your acetate's going to peel off. That's okay. That's why we did 3 over and 3 up. Just position it again and you can double stamp. I always seem to need to when I'm stamping on acetate. It doesn't matter how well I ink up the stamp. I'm never quick enough. So it always seems to have a little bit of patchiness. So I like to double stamp on all of my acetate. So I peeled that up, and there I have this gorgeous frame on the acetate ready to go. Now this would be gorgeous to add some alcohol inks behind and color it in that way. You could even use your alcohol markers behind on the back and color in the images that way too. But I'm going to go ahead and create a shaker card. I need to stamp my sentiment first though. So I'm using the Of Quartz stamp set from the Gem stamp set that I showed beforehand. And I stamped that right in the center again with the same snowflake ink I used before. Now, like I said, I added removable adhesive to this. And normally you just rub it to get it off with your finger and it kind of balls up and falls off the paper. That did not work with this one. So I seen it from the front. I really did not want to start this card over. So I made a last ditch effort with my alcohol to get this off the back, and luckily it worked. You want to be super careful because alcohol will also take off the ink on the front. So make sure you're not smushing too much alcohol in there. I sprayed a little bit on a cloth and just wiped it over the back to remove that adhesive. So if you ever have a need to get some removable adhesive off of your acetate, alcohol works great. Now it's time to create a frame for this. I did not think this through. I did not have a frame or a die that was the right size to make a frame for this. So I'm going to make my own. I'm going to go ahead and cut this down to 3.5 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and cut down my craft rectangle to 4 3/4 by 3.5 inches. Now, if you are comfortable using your paper trimmer to cut out a rectangle on the inside of this as well, by all means, go for it. I never have good luck doing it that way. I never seem to land at just the right spot. So I'm going to show you another way to create a quick frame that's super simple and easy. You just need a ruler. I like the Tim Holtz ruler because of all the different measurements it has on it, but I bet that new ruler from My Sweet Petunia would also work really well for this. So what I'm going to do is come in 3/8 of an inch on all 4 sides and draw a quick line. This is going to give me a guide as to where I need to start and stop as I'm doing my cutting. Like I said before on my paper trimmer, I never know quite where to start and quite where to stop, so my lines always look a little bit wonky. This guide, just by drawing the pencil marks, is really going to help me. Now, once you get your pencil marks in, you could take it over to your paper trimmer, but again, I have a hard time seeing with the cutting tool in the way. I just never get those clean cuts I'm looking for. So I like to flip my little ruler over with making sure I have that little metal piece up against my craft knife so I don't chop into it. And then I line it up right with my pencil marks, and I use my craft knife. This is a super simple and easy way to create your frame. I do that across all 4 sides, then I have my frame ready to go. I just flip it over and use the other side, so I don't even have to erase my extra pencil marks at all. It's ready to go. Now it's time to create the shaker. So with a shaker, you want to make sure that everything is nice and secure. You're going to have some loose sequins in there. You might even have some glitter. You might have some seed beads. You don't want that falling out. So make sure everything is glued down properly. I'm starting by gluing my frame. I like to go ahead and place my frame down and then place my piece of acetate over that. Why I'm using acetate, you want to be able to see through this. This is a window. You're going to have things inside of this component that you'll be able to see. So you can use acetate like I'm using here. I will leave what I use linked down below. It is a Duralar film. It's from Graphics. I love it. It's a little bit sturdier and heavier than your normal acetate. And it's what I really have started loving and using on all of my shaker cards, and I make a lot of them. I use dry adhesive to place that down. Make sure it's a good one, nice and sticky. Again, I'll leave what I use linked down below. Then it's time to make your little frame, or your well, if you will, where everything's going to sit. You want to use some dimensional adhesive. I'm using foam tape here, but you want to make sure everything is nice and tight. No gaps. You can see I have a little gap in the top right hand corner there. That is okay because I'm using larger sequins. If you were using glitter or something, that would not be okay. Seed beads glitter will fall out of that. So make sure if you're using smaller things, you want to make sure everything's nice and tight, no gaps whatsoever. Now I like to peel off my backing paper and then place in my components inside. I'm using sequins here from Cat Scrappiness. This is the Tricks Mix. And that's just because whenever I start to take the backing paper off, I feel like the paper jerks around a lot, sequins move. Also, before I take the backing paper off, I like to prep the inside with just a swipe of my embossing bag to take away any static. Once you have everything set to go, place your backing on top of that. You can use vellum, you can use more acetate, or you can use cardstock if you want some color behind it like I did here. It really is up to you. Now, the only thing I had left to do was trim that out with my paper trimmer and add it to my card base. Super simple. Now, the of quartz isn't quite finished, so I finished off my sentiment on the inside of the card with I didn't forget about you and another little stamp off to the left-hand side. Super simple and easy to finish off the more complicated shaker on the outside. There you have it, 3 ways to use that new frame stamp from Clair Stamps. It's a super fun one and gorgeous as well. That is going to do it for me today. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget all the information down in the description box. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, I would appreciate it if you enjoy my content. Happy crafting, everyone.